Hey everyone, Omar here, and welcome to yet another episode where I'm taking photos with the Fujifilm X-T5 and the 50mm f1. You know, I think it's a little weird to only make videos when you have new gear when you really prefer the gear that you already have. And I have a ton of old videos as well that I want to edit, and the majority of them were shot with the X-T3, so I'm still going to be putting those together. Like I said in my other videos, the 50f1 is probably my favorite portrait lens of all time, and previously the X-T3 was my favorite all-time camera, and now it's the X-T5. Generally speaking, I think most cameras over the last 5 years are perfectly fine, but I do have a favorite overall camera, and that's the XH2S that I'm recording this video on right now. But moving on to today's video, I want to take you back to a photo shoot I did with my friend Maica, which if you saw my video on the Canon G1X Mark III, she was my photo subject there, but I always bring my X-T5 and 50f1 with me whenever I'm doing a more experimental video, especially when someone gets ready and gets dressed and meets me on location to shoot a couple of photos, just in case things don't work out the way I think they will, and that way I can at least guarantee them some really good photos. And the 50f1 attached to pretty much any Fuji camera guarantees that much from me because I'm really familiar with how the entire camera system works, what the characteristics of the lens are, and I do like that it's just a tad bit wider than a standard 85mm focal length portrait lens. What spawned this idea? We're taking a look here, and I used the lighting setup when it started getting a little darker that I had for the G1X Mark III. I'm going to link that video above if you want to take a look at it, but we're focusing today on this particular setup, and I have this problem where if I can bring an off-camera flash, I absolutely will, and a lot of times it's a little more cumbersome than it should be, and it's not always like super necessary. Technically it's not ever really necessary, but photography, on top of being a thing I do professionally, is also a hobby of mine, so I do like taking that little extra step regardless of how inconvenient it is because it's fun. I know that's like kind of illegal to say sometimes these days, but it's fun. We're starting off with these shots where I had the on-camera flash. Obviously this is a video about doing a photo shoot without that, and I'm going to show you why, because right about now, well not now, we'll finish up these photos here. Just a side note, one of the things I love about any fast aperture glass, look, if you buy something with like an f1.0, 1.2, 1.4 aperture, you bought it to shoot wide open, and it's just how transformative it can make a scene that's otherwise just a very plain scene in your neighborhood. And these shots here, you can tell the ones where the strobe fired off on, but the 360 camera called it quits for whatever reason. I think it's about time to replace that 1X2. So the screen recording kind of shows you what the ambient light looks like and what it looks like afterwards with the flash and with some post-processing. Maica, by the way, I'm gonna plug her every time she's in one of these videos, and she's gonna be in a lot of these videos. Beauty Beheld Artistry. Check her out on Instagram. We're gonna overlay it there. I'll have a link to her IG in the description below. Phenomenal makeup artist, great model to have on hand. You can see actually if you ever have trouble with directing people, you see how she does these repeating motions. The repeating motions will help you kind of frame a general shot that you want without it being a little too stiff and still life. All of those shots were with the strobe, and towards the end I could not fit the off-camera flash setup, the stand, in the tight area we were, so I took some natural light shots and kind of remembered, oh, I forgot that you could take photos without needing a speed light or strobe for every single shot there is. Admittedly, it's a little ridiculous, but if you look at the last couple of videos I did, I may have occasionally taken a shot without a strobe, but the majority of them were taken with an off-camera flash, where realistically you have two options, even if you have an uncooperative son, and those options are typically to reposition the person so that they have a more flattering light on them, so they don't have like raccoon eyes, so they're not squinting when they're staring into the sun. Or you can use the uneven lighting to your advantage, where you have like a really big rim light. You treat the sun as a giant rim light, or you take a slightly different angle or something. Like, you can always get a shot. It might not be the shot that you have in mind, but if it's something that's not spec work, and a lot of these collaborative events are just creative photography to begin with, you'll be able to get something for sure. I'm gonna pause it at that last shot. I think the colors in that staircase look really good. I think that what I'm gonna start doing is shooting more and more often without a strobe. The reason for that is that, similar to how I've become reliant on having, say, blazing fast autofocus or a really wide aperture to just blur out the background, relying on a lot of technology, and off-camera flash does count as that. It's a tool, but when you're reliant on it for every single shot, you do tend to kind of get rusty in the basics of things like composition, problem solving on site when it comes to angles and dealing with ambient lighting. Also, in the hotter weather, you do tend to sweat more, and it does slow things down a little bit. And with that being said, my lovely volunteer today is the same one that you saw in the Canon 24-105 video, which I'm going to link in a card right above here, and this is Victoria, and I'm going to put a link to her bio down below as well. As I said before, I recently moved to North Jersey, and I was able to connect with a few local creatives. Us three work really well together, so expect to see them in the future, but also if you're in North Jersey and you're interested in being a subject in one of these videos, let me know in the comments or shoot me a message on Instagram. I'm gonna let this entire shoot play out, and honestly, I forgot how much easier it is to just walk around with a camera, not worry about carrying a strobe or a little cart of equipment around. And I did have to touch up my reflection out of some of those shots there. You can see it in the screen recording. But these were mostly just stuck in the Provia color space. Under the brick, I did reduce the excessive reflective reds on her skin and some of the global reds as well from the brick. And whenever we got on the greens, I did actually reduce the greens on her skin as well, because when you are surrounded by a lot of grass, some of that light is going to reflect, and it's a bigger problem with natural light. And people will end up with kind of like a green tinge on their skin. If you've ever seen that before, that's the reason why. Nowadays, masking options are really easy, so you can just do a subject select on their skin and just literally reduce it through a slider. But you do it too much and it starts to look a little unnatural. Oh, and these are actually friends of mine who were randomly there practicing the Depka. So I'm gonna play some of the audio there, but I'm not looking to get a copyright strike on this. And we worked this area quite a bit, so we were here for a minute. It was also a nice little reprieve from the sun, which I think this was the first sunny day in like almost a week that we've had in the area, which is hilarious. Typically you'd want to shoot, especially if you're shooting natural light, you'd want to shoot when it's nice and overcast. And we were able to work through these shots pretty easily because I didn't really have to reposition a light stand. I could just kind of move around without worrying about light placement whatsoever. This was a little challenging. You can see I was at 1/8,000th of a second here. And I did have to stop up just a little bit, and even then I think she had more than a few hot spots, but this is what I was talking about, where you just adapt for the lighting rather than worry about the lighting in general. So I just made sure that she didn't have really dark circles under her eyes, and that's what we commonly refer to as raccoon eyes. I know I said that earlier, I'm not sure if I explained it. And there's a little bit of that there with the lashes. This area was really cool. We didn't spend too much time here because it was in direct sunlight, and also we didn't know exactly what the tick situation was in the area. And the foreground elements are always fun to play with, especially when you're shooting. And truthfully, this is why I really like shooting on location over studios, and I like working with streetwear brands. They're not huge fans of set design. Like, you'll have maybe campaign drops where we'll shoot it against a set, but having their regular content or their lifestyle shots being in the streets or in the woods if it's like a hiking apparel brand, and it's a more fun shoot overall. Here we tried to use, had her framed in the trees, tried to take advantage of the water that was not as still as it normally is in the background. And again, playing it through with 40 megapixels, I'm showing you the full width of the photos, but I can punch in up to 400 or 500% on this YouTube video with pretty much no resolution loss whatsoever. And having that in an APS-C size package, the X-T5, even with a cage, is smaller than any of the other cameras I have out of a cage. And the 50F1 is considerably smaller than something like my Canon 85-1.2. I do love the compact nature of it. I never really factor in a camera size and weight, or I didn't until I started shooting on some very distant locations in the past, and having the smaller camera size with this kind of image quality popping out really is a nice thing to have. Is it enough of a reason to go with this camera lens setup if you're like in a different ecosystem? Probably not. These were actually my favorite shots here, by the way. I do love tall grass shots, and I don't know too many places in North Jersey that have like that tall grass. So if you know any places that do, drop them in the comments below, and I'll probably be visiting those pretty soon, especially with the fall sneaking up on us really fast right now. Yeah, we were really going for the a mix of like bridal and woodland fairy here. I think she knocked out the woodland fairy look pretty well. She even had randomly just some wings in her car. But they were for a shoot later in the day, and the last thing I want to do is have them snag up against a branch and ruin that shoot.
If possible, try a lean back, a slight lean back with it.
Yeah, definitely keep your hips mobile because you'll be squatting down quite a bit to get some different angles when you're out and about. And yeah, that's pretty much it for that shoot there. So you just watched about 7 minutes of B-roll there from the shoot. I think the entire shoot was 45 minutes. It was after she got her hair and makeup done for another shoot she was heading to afterwards, and because I'm not carrying a strobe around, and because the logistics of just having a camera and lens and not worrying about anything else, never mind the screen recorder and the 360 camera, I barely notice them these days, just to give everyone here like a behind the scenes look of what's going on. Because this was during that crazy heat wave we had, but again, we thought it was going to be tolerable since it was overcast every other day of the week, but we just, it didn't quite work out that way, and that at least presented us with the opportunity of seeing what it's like dealing with some very direct sunlight. Because I think other than the photos where she was in front of the lake specifically, where there was absolutely no coverage whatsoever, you wouldn't know that we were under direct sunlight, 97 degrees, midday. Horrible, horrible, horrible time to shoot. Yeah, and that's another piece of advice. If you're planning a shoot, try not to shoot with the midday sun. You can thank me later for that. You don't have to wait till golden hour, but the midday sun where it's just straight on top of you, it's just not flattering, it's not fun to work with. But as you can see, where there's a will, there's a way. That's all there is for this video. If you want to see a sample of a few different lenses, I did a shoot with my friend Babs down in Baltimore, maybe like a year ago now. I'll link that above. It was with the X-T5 along with the 50f1, the 3314, and I think the 1614 if memory serves me right. If you want to see any other videos, let me know in the comments below, and I'll catch you at the next one.